Story time on how my mom tried to convince me to have a threesome with her. So I had just graduated high school, and my mom was single for a while. Then she started dating this guy, which me and my brother really liked, but he was a few years younger than my mom. And honestly, we were happy for her. She was very depressed and miserable with my dad, so we were okay with it because she was finally happy. So like I said, I had just graduated high school, and I always said I never wanted to go to college, so I started working retail. One day while I was at work, my mom called me and said, "Hey, let's go out shopping." And who am I to say no? So after I got out of work, I met my mom, and we went lingerie shopping. That's what she specifically wanted to get. So we were at the store, and the first thing she said was, "Let's get matching sets," which was weird coming from my mom, but I said, "Fine, come back for part 2. Story time on how my mom tried to convince me to have a threesome with her. Part 2. So like I said, it was really awkward coming from my mom because I've always been close with my mom, but never that close. And like I said, she was miserable with my dad, so I tried to do everything to make her happy. And I said yes. So we got our matching sets and we went home. When we got home, her boyfriend was there. Awkward, but whatever. I said hi to him and went straight to my room. My mom called me downstairs 10 minutes after, told me she wanted to propose me something. But first she said, "So you know there was a reason why I wanted to buy matching sets with you?" And I said, "No." And let's call her boyfriend Brian. She said, "Well, Brian gave me a really good idea, and I wasn't sure at the time, but I want to try new things." And then she said these words, "Let's have a threesome." I was speechless. And she said, "I know it sounds crazy now. Come back for part 3. Story time on how my mom tried to convince me to have a threesome with her." So she said, "I know it sounds crazy now, but hear me out." And then Brian jumped in and said, "It's not an actual threesome. What we really want is for you to watch us, but we want you to wear your mom's same lingerie." And I freaked out and literally rashed my mom and told her that for her, I would do anything. But that is so inappropriate, so disgusting, and most important of all, I said, "I'm your daughter." And only after all of that, she realized what she tried to propose me was wrong. And she kicked Brian out and tried to tell me how she was so sorry that she's embarrassed for herself. And guys, I called my dad, moved in with my dad. I have some communication with my mom, but after that day, nothing will ever be the same.
Extremely toxic best friend story time. So when I was in 8th grade, there was this boy. And this boy would go around telling almost every girl that he liked her. And I was one of those girls. And he would do stuff with all of us. And there were like 11 of us. So we all hated each other. Especially this one girl, and we're gonna call her Abby. And every time we saw each other, we would be super mean to each other. Well, a year passed, we stopped talking to this kid. And I bumped into her at homecoming and basically apologized. So after that, we became best friends. And everything was good until every time I told her about a guy, she would start talking to them. Like this one boy that I was Snapchatting and talking to, she accidentally sent nudes to him and said, "Oh, sorry, I meant to send them to my boyfriend." So then she called one of my other best friends and said, "No, it actually wasn't an accident." And of course he told me because he was my best friend. So I was like, whatever, and stopped talking to the boy. And she did it again, like for part 2. Extremely toxic best friend part 2. So pretty much her excuse for that was, "Oh, well, he said that he was gonna leak my nudes if I didn't send him them again." Which was a lie because literally half the school already had her nudes. So then I started talking to this other boy, and he lived like right down the street from her. So she was like, "If you want to go to his house, you can." And I was like, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yeah, just go tell my mom." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I went and told her mom where I was going and went over his house. So I walked back to her house and she literally locked me out. Like her mom had to come open the door for me to let me in. And she was like, "Oh, it's a good thing you came back when you did, because I was going to drive you home now and tell your dad everything that you did." And she goes, "I don't think you guys should be together because you're inexperienced." And she would always tell me how he flirts with her all the time. So after our friendship ended, she goes, "I just felt like it was always a competition between me and you."
Story time about how I had to beat my grandma's ass. So to give you a quick little backstory about my grandma was not innocent. She used to run the streets back in her day. So I wasn't that close to my grandma, and neither was my mom, but my mom would still try to help her out from time to time and give her money. So one day, my dumb grandma and her dumb old friends decided to go rob a bunch of people. Now, of course, they old asses get caught, and my mother has to bail them out. So after my mom gets her from the jail, she's going on the whole time in the car like, you should have given me more money. So they're arguing and everything, and my mom's like, I don't understand why you're complaining. I always help you out when you ask me. My grandma feels like she shouldn't have to ask because she's her mother. So we're bringing my grandma back to her house, and as soon as we pull in the driveway, she gets out of the car and slams the door and goes inside. So as me and my mom are walking up the stairs to get inside, my grandma opens the door with a pistol. She's threatening to shoot her if she doesn't give her more money. Like for part 2. Story time about how I had to beat my own grandma's ass. So like I said in part 1, that old ass lady pulled out a pistol on my goddamn mama. Now, mind you, we are in the hood, so seeing pistols is not a big thing to most people in that neighborhood. Long story short, nobody called the cops, so we had to handle it ourselves. So I'm trying to calm my grandma down, and then she aims it at me. That's when my mom lost it. So she tries to grab the gun, and my grandma was not feeling that. So with my grandma's free hand, she swings on my mom, hitting her in the face. Now this was some ghetto ass shit. So my mom and grandma are on the ground fighting like some ghetto ass hood rats. And I didn't want to have to fight my grandma, but she started putting the gun to my mom's head. So I get on top of my grandma and I start whooping that ass. Because at this point, I was convinced she was actually going to shoot her. So I'm kicking her old ass in the back and dragging her off by her gray ass hair. As soon as I got them separated, I called the police, got her old ass locked up, and no, we did not bail her out this time.
Story time, how I found out my substitute teacher was actually my biological father. So of course I went to school for our usual class and our teacher wasn't there. So we had a substitute that day and I could have sworn that I recognized him, but I couldn't tell from where. There would be times during the lecture where I would look up and he would just be looking at me. I felt like there was a weird connection between the two of us, but I didn't exactly know where to place it. Since it was the last hour of the day, he asked me to stay after class. I immediately got the creeps and said no, I had to catch my bus. And I hadn't seen him for weeks after that. Some days later, I noticed a for sale sign on my neighbor's yard. So during their open house, I decided to peek out my window and see who was visiting. And there he was, my substitute teacher. I got the creeps and I just ran upstairs to focus on something else. Once the house sold and the move-in trucks came in, I saw that it was my substitute teacher that actually bought it. I was terrified but still felt this weird connection. That's when my mom offered for us to bring cookies over to his house. She said it was the neighborly thing to do, so that's what we did. So we went to go knock on his door. Stay tuned for part 2 and add me on Instagram. Okay, so part 2 to finding out my substitute teacher was actually my biological father. So the whole interaction between my mom and him was so odd. He was clearly high, so my mom just set the cookies down on his front door. And we just left. Many nights after that, I just felt like someone was always watching me. I constantly got the creeps, and I would just notice like little stuff going missing. But I never thought it was that big of a deal. But a few days later, this man invited us over for a dinner, and my mom made me go. And it was just as strange. Like, I could tell that my mom was so uncomfortable. I asked to be excused to go to the bathroom, and once he showed me where it was, I did a little bit of snooping. In a room close to his bathroom, there was pictures of us. Like my mom and I, and baby pictures of me, and also recent pictures that we were completely unaware of. I ran downstairs and grabbed my mom and told her that we had to leave. She agreed, and once I told her about the pictures, we filed a police report. The police told me he was my biological father, and he was in the process of searching for me for 3 years. And to this day, my mom has still not talked to me about the situation. Sometimes you have to trust your gut. Add me on Instagram, and if you have a story you'd like to share, DM me. Storytime, my toxic best friend outed me to the entire school. So one day, one of my best friends from a neighboring school decided to move to my school, and she was extremely upset because her best friend over there came out as bi. So I ended up using this as an opportunity to come out bi as well. And she was like, well, it's okay for you. I just got really close to her. We'll call the girl Becky because no one likes a Becky, and we can call her friend Heather. So fast forward to after the situation had calmed down, we decided to all go prom dress shopping. So Heather and I were talking and we really hit it off. And I think Becky legitimately forgot about our sexuality because we were all talking about how much we have in common, and we brought that up as well. She just looked at us and was like, oh, I forgot about that. And she just shrugged it off. But we continued to hang out for a few weeks. One of these weekends, we all went to church together, and the sermon was about how God accepts you no matter what your sexuality is. But of course, Becky turns around to us and says that Heather and I could never date because it would F everything up. Later that day, Heather actually ended up admitting that she had feelings for me, and this is when Becky lost it. Stay tuned for part 2 and follow me on Instagram. Part 2 of my toxic best friend outing me to the entire school. So at the beach later that day, Heather and I decided to tell Becky how we felt. She freaked and wouldn't talk to us and locked herself in the bathroom. And we had to tell her that it's fine, we won't date, just so she would let herself out. I thought she was being entirely selfish, not wanting her best friends to be happy. And then she literally took my phone and went through all of our texts together. She woke up the next day all ready for Heather and I to be together and completely apologized. And then when we went to the mall that day, she walked away from us to go look at the hot guys, but then turned around and got pissed at us for falling behind. And this is why she said she didn't want us to date, yet we weren't even dating. She said she felt like she was gonna have to choose between Heather and I because of the whole situation, and I guess she just picked me. Becky became extremely codependent and didn't want to leave my side. She was pissed if I spent time with anyone else and basically forced Heather out of my life. I ended up running into Heather and inviting her to my 18th birthday, and this is when Becky had her massive breakdown. At my birthday, she outed me to everyone at the party, my mom, and Heather's mom as well. My Insta is linked below for more content.